would like to update this interview because it's been a little while since I talked to Sandra. I got a chance to read her book. It's called The Housekeeper's Secret, a memoir. It is such a great book. I enjoyed it so much, and I wanted to make sure I got that in. And I just wanted to say it's a very touching story. It's hard to believe at times that it's true because it reads like a beautiful novel. It's just very well written and really full of descriptions of Sandra's family and all the things they went through and all of the mystery surrounding Lee, her housekeeper. And then finally, in the end, you get to find out what the secret is. I really enjoyed it. It's a great read. And I wanted to make sure I said that. So now we're going to start the interview. Thank you for listening to The Storied Human. Hi, and welcome to The Storied Human. I'm Lynn Thompson. I have my guest today, award-winning author Sandra Schnakenburg. She's going to tell us the story, and it's a wonderful one, about how she ended up leaving corporate finance after 30 years to fulfill a promise to her housekeeper and tell her story. She wrote a book, and it won an award, and we're here for it. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you, Lynn. Thanks for having me on your podcast. Yes.
I'm not sure where to start.
Okay.
I'm dying to read your book. And I love that you kept you kept the promise to tell this secret. So
Yes.
can you give me just a little sense of a timeline? Because just I know the housekeeper asked you to wait until she had passed to write the book. So how long between when she asked you this to when she passed and you wrote it?
Well, that's an intriguing question. First, it's been 30 years since she's been gone, and the book is finally published. So I found Lee's ashes. She died in 1994. I found her ashes in my mom's closet 15 years after she died. And I said, oh my God, the promise I made to Lee, I need to go find the burial spots of her husband and son, which she told us had passed in a tragic car accident before she came to our house to work as a housekeeper. So I searched and searched and searched to put her ashes and reunite them with her family. And I found nothing. I didn't find that she was married or that she had a child that died. And it was just a mystery of who was Lee. But eventually, through much research, I found that she wasn't the person she said she was. Her name, and I'm not giving any spoilers here. This is not a secret, this part. Her name, her birth date, and her past story was all fabricated for her to get the job as our housekeeper. I was 3.5 when she arrived, and she stayed 30 years. So on her deathbed, she asked me to write her story, a story she always said, I have a story and nobody will ever believe. One day I'm going to write a book. Well, lung cancer ended up getting her too early. She was 72. And she asked me, she goes, I ran out of time. Could you write my story? And I said, Lee, you never told me your story. I've asked you a million times over the years. I got punished and sent to my room. And my mom reprimanded me. If you keep asking Lee and prying about her past, she's going to leave. So I never knew her story. And she said, well, will you try to write it? And I said, I will try when the time is right. And then she died shortly after. And I didn't know her story then. So I was,
Oh my
young,
gosh.
just married, and I was pregnant with twins, and I started my life. So all that happened. Then 15 years later, when my mom died, I found the ashes, right? So that's
Yeah.
when I kind of triggered the inciting incident. When they say you have an inciting incident, what triggered the
Yeah.
story? It's like, I'm
Yeah.
going to go find the burial spots. Well, the burial spots didn't exist. So why? Who was this person? And that's the investigative journey part of the story that takes the reader down a crazy, suspenseful journey. And it's just such a shock. And it was shock to our family. It took me about 5 years to put pen to paper after I realized what happened to her, because our whole family just went like paralyzed. They go, how do we know Lee so well? She raised us. She was the best thing that ever happened to our family. Yet we didn't even know anything about her past. And now here she is. She wants this story told. And she's put this assignment on me. So it took me after that another, I would say from 2015, and now it's 2025. I mean, it came out in December 24. That's 10 years. I would say 2015, I just started, practicing writing. I studied writing. I was in a finance background for 30 years, so I had to go
Yeah.
back to classes, study writing, read many, many writing books. I got obsessed with the idea of learning how to write on my own and make like getting my own MFA. And I wrote a lot of essays, but I wrote the book in essay form originally. And that was probably in 2020. It was all in essay form. And I thought that was a great way to tell the story, but it wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough. It didn't flow enough. It was too choppy. So there was like another rewrite and then another rewrite and then a past present. And lo and behold, the whole journey, I would say, well, it depends on where you want to start the timeline. I mean, it's 30 years from when she died. It
Yeah.
would be like, 10 years. Well, my mom died in, it was like 15 years after she died. Then of course it took another 5 or 6 years to discover the truth and then another 10 years to write the book. So
That's
basically
amazing.
the story kept haunting me to finish and I kept quitting.
Yeah. And you didn't
Yeah.
give up.
I
I
didn't
think
give up.
that's so fascinating because when you hear the title of the book, you just think, oh, she told her secret and she kept it. Like you kept that secret and you waited until after she passed to tell it. That's what we're all assuming when we hear that, but that's
Oh,
not true. It was much harder and much more prolonged, and yet you didn't give up.
that's right. Well, I wanted to know why she lied about who she was.
Oh
And then
my
I
God, that's
realized,
so
you know,
ridiculous. Yeah, that's so hard to
and I
believe.
realized when she lived in our house, we lived on a 44-acre estate. We were very isolated, and
Yeah,
she didn't want to be found and she didn't want to be found out. And that's why she liked
yeah.
our families that she could hide out and nobody could find her.
Oh
And
my
she ended up
gosh.
being this amazing lady, like to our family and to my mom. And, to me, she was just everything. So
Oh,
she got to be who she really wanted to be without her past haunting her.
that's so wonderful that she found a haven with you. But
Hmm.
so weird that, after the fact, we have to re-examine who we thought somebody was. That's like that's a head trip, right?
That was a
Somebody,
head trip.
yeah,
Yeah.
you grew up with her.
But
She
there's
was
a
like,
question about that too. Like who was she? Was she the person that she was labeled before she came to our house? Or was really the real person we had was her because she got to be who she was without any label, you
well,
know?
it just sounds like she was so loving and such a nice member of your family that that's who she really was. And you allowed her to be that. But it's so bizarre that somebody could change so much of their identity. Although, you do hear about people having to do such things. It's hard to imagine pulling that off.
Absolutely. I mean, she pulled it off, well, especially with a family that was intimately close with her. She knew every one of every person in our family's secrets. She was the person we all went to because she never told anybody's secrets. And we had so much confidence and trust in her, but everything about her was a lie at the end of the day. We didn't know.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's really interesting that she pulled it off. And I think a part of her felt really bad about that because that's why she waited. And that it's kind of a God ordained timing because my we didn't find her ashes until my mom passed away.
Yeah.
I'm sure that part of her prayer was that my mom would never know she lied because
Oh.
I think she was so close to my mom and everything about those two together were just inseparable. Like they really held each other through life's toughest times. And I think and Lee not being able to open up because I think she felt bad having to tell my mom that she had lied to get the job. And yet it was that, remember, it's the days before computers and background checks and, Google or anything like that. And she kind of knew when the computer age was coming out because she died in 94. So, computers were starting to come out now and information was starting to be accessible. And I think she kind of had an intuition that sooner or later we would figure it out, or I would figure it out maybe. Yeah.
Right. That it was going to get harder to hide.
Yes.
I'm so intrigued that she kept secrets so well too. That's so interesting. She knew how to
Hmm.
keep your secrets.
Yeah, she was very much a confidant.
So we don't want to give it away,
Hmm.
but we want to talk about what surprised you the most
Right.
as you uncovered.
Hmm. Well, I think it was a big surprise to me that she was hiding out in our estate
Yeah.
for 30 years as didn't want to be found and didn't want to be found out. And people were looking for her.
Whoa.
And yeah, and they were stopped at the agency. She had left very strict you know, like in her file was a very strict note, like it was under lock and key, and no one would ever was allowed to reveal what family she had gone to live with.
That's so amazing. That's kind of scary too, that she
Yeah,
had to go
so
to that level of
yeah, but they
protection.
ended up tracking her all the way there, the people that were
Wow.
looking for her. And so it that part was that she really pulled it off also, like in all the days she just wanted to live for the moment. She was the only person I ever met that lived in the essence, the present moment so fully. Like she enjoyed every moment. Like, and I looked at her because I worried about the past and I was worried about the future. I was like always overthinking everything. And I was in that place where we were having a lot of psychological issues in the family. There was verbal abuse, there was insecurities, I had a car accident, there was
Ugh,
um, you know, difficulty healing. There was all that. And I just looked at Lee and I said, how does she have that contentment and joy? I want some of that.
I
So
know.
I was hang out with her just for that.
Why do you think she did? Was she just so grateful to get away from her old life?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with what happened. Has She did have traumatic brain injury. We can't say how, but
Oh,
we will say that I do think that she, had gotten to the point where I think it's up to the reader if they want to decide if it's the treatments that caused her long-term memory or if it was something that she chose to forget. And that people do that, they have selective memory. There's a lot of things the reader can digest and make, you know, conclusions themselves. I didn't really direct the reader to the answer because I know I didn't know the answer. She's
yeah,
not alive for me to ask her anymore. And I do think if you put all the pieces together, that this is the way she wanted it. She wanted us to be able to figure it out. She wanted us to decide who she was. But the essence of her was that spirit in the present moment.
yeah.
Her cup was full. She was always ready to give, help, love. Everything about her was like of a healthy minded person. But how did she get there after all she'd been through is the question too of the day. Like
Right.
when you hear her story, you're like, how does somebody do that? It's like Viktor Frankl's book. I refer to that a lot. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it was like it's called The Meaning of Life, and he survived the Holocaust, had lost everything. They took his manuscript, which they didn't have computers then, and his wife and children were all, killed, and he, and all his friends there were committing suicide day after day. So he's like, how does one rise above all of it and thrive when they get out of there and become something that you can give back to life? Like who giving back to the world something good of yourself after so much bad has happened to you? That's a question. I mean, is it a gift? Is it a, an innate seed that was planted from God? Is it it's a choice. It is really a choice that Lee made.
That's amazing. I've read that book. It was so powerful. I remember he said the best of us did not survive.
Right,
That
right.
just like I could, you could have just like knocked me out at that point. I was like, I never even thought of that. The
Yeah.
best of us did not survive. And he talks about the people that are more generous and giving, and you don't
Hmm.
know how you'll react in any situation. And I, I'm just so struck by where you are at the time, right? I know that I've been brave at certain times in my life. I've been not so brave at other times. It just depends where you are when these things happen to you, where you are in your life, how resilient you're feeling.
Mhm. Or even if you have a knowing, it's kind of an inner knowing that you have a bigger purpose. Somewhere out there, there is somebody like I know my mom was on her knees every day praying for somebody like Lee. And
That's
isn't
so
that something? She
beautiful.
was probably on the other side praying for a family like ours that she could be a part of and accept her just the way she was. We didn't even have to go out of our way to accept her. We just loved her the way she was. We never, the only rule was you're not allowed to ask her about her past.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this, but
And
that, and
she
when I
was,
did, as I got older, she got really upset. But nevertheless, she ended up asking me to write her book, and I know nothing about her, you know.
that blows my mind. Now, why do you think she felt compelled to leave her story with you? Like to let you research it and tell it? What was that impulse?
One, she wanted her story to be told when she wasn't around anymore. And when my mom wasn't around, as I mentioned earlier, but more importantly, I think she knew that I would figure it out because I was so inquisitive and curious and always prying, and I knew something was off, something was missing. Why didn't we celebrate these people's birthdays when or their day they died? What was the day that they had this tragic accident? Like these pictures were on her mirror for 30 years, like till the
Wow.
day she died of these people that I think she got the pictures maybe at a Goodwill or something.
Wow.
Literally, what like I just couldn't understand why she didn't like say, "Oh, today's the day my lost my husband, and this is the day of the accident." Like you'd think at least over the period of time, maybe that would come up,
Yes. Right.
maybe on a moment, kind of tender moment or something, but nothing. So I just felt like there was something up.
You felt
And
it. You were like a little investigator. Yeah.
yeah, and I did
Yeah.
feel it. I had a lot of intuitive, curiosity as a child. I used to think like when my, well, when things were happening with my dad, I had an intuition what he was up to. And I just felt it. That's just something that
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah. I have
Yeah.
that too. Now, I know
Mhm.
faith is really important to you,
Yeah,
and it sounds like your mother had a lot of faith. Did you get the sense that did faith help guide her?
absolutely.
Yeah.
When she was raised in a Creole family, and that was I discovered later after she died, it was a very famous family, and there's a museum on her whole
Wow.
family in Louisiana. It's pretty wild, but she had many, many priests in her family. There's
Wow.
a church, St. Augustine, in the Cane River that has, which I visited with my husband, and all the people were buried in the back of the church are all Metoyers. Like it's amazing, and they're the priests and the people who ran the whole town. They're all her family. They had the biggest plantation there back in the day. Um, so when I said to her when we were growing up, I'm like, we went to church on Sundays, our family, and I'm like, Lee, because I knew she was Catholic, and that's what connected her with my mom. They prayed a lot. They didn't pray together; they prayed separately, but she kept St. Jude in her pocket all the time, every day, the St. Jude prayer. And I'd ask her, like, what is that? And she was, it's the prayer of the hopeless and the helpless.
Oh,
The
wow.
I was like, who? I go, you're not hopeless and helpless. I go, we're hopeless and helpless. I go, why are you praying that for you when we're the ones that are hopeless and helpless? And she was like, oh, honey, you have no idea, like that kind of thing. And I was like, wow, now I know why, right? So she did pray every day. She probably went downstairs and prayed a lot for now I know what, for all these other things we found out. But I think she also said, I said, why don't you come to church with us on Sunday? And she goes, oh, honey, she goes, I went to church every single day of my life growing up, enough times to cover me till the day I die. So I'm
Oh,
covered. So that was her whole thing is like, it's not about going to church. It was about being with God in prayer.
yeah.
And I'm a lot like that now. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think you have to go to church. Like it's not like it's like a duty to make you feel good, but it's also like maybe some people feel closer to God, but I think you can feel go closer to God if you're deeply in meditation and prayer anywhere, or even light a candle when you're doing, I think that's also very you can get very connected to God.
I'm right there with you.
Mhm.
We recently had to go to a funeral, and my husband was raised Catholic, so I wasn't raised Catholic, so it's always kind of a big to do
Yeah.
for me because it's just there's more stuff going on. But I really felt at peace with respecting the fact that I don't know, I just didn't it didn't irritate me the way it did when I was younger. I
Yeah.
just felt really peaceful that
Mhm.
God was there and that people, people were going through this beautiful ritual and
Yeah.
soothing each other. And I don't know, I just see it like I always say on this podcast, there's a lot of ways up the mountain.
Yeah. I think what my faith grew a lot when I just started questioning everything and learning it on my own. And then now going back to church now, it's more fulfilling.
Yeah,
And I do love tradition and I love
yeah,
ritual. I think it's wonderful the way they marry in the church and the way they, bury in the church. I mean, I think that's all great. My daughter chose not to get married in the church and it was kind of a falling out in the family. But you know what? God was everywhere. We were in a
yeah,
beautiful field and it was just all over, and
yeah.
when I think about it, it doesn't matter. As long as
What a
their
beautiful,
hearts are in the Lord, it's fine.
it's a beautiful thought. My daughter also married outside of the church. They married in a park right near the tree where my daughter's husband used to sit under this tree when they were communicating with each other.
That's so
And
sweet.
it's funny, you're reminding me of my dad who loved nature so much. And he
Mhm.
used to go to this like wild place in Canada that was like 40 miles away from civilization. They would go down these, just to fish in these like lakes where no one went hardly. And he always told me that that was his cathedral, that
Oh,
the
that's so
forest was his
sweet.
cathedral. And that's how we were raised. So my
Mhm.
mother was like super Lutheran and we went to church. We were raised in the church and all that was lovely. I'm so glad I was. It's nice to
Mhm.
have a tradition that you sort of, not move on from, but incorporate, right? You keep moving through your life as you get
Helped
older.
you.
And
Mhm.
but what a beautiful thing that you said, that you just saw that when we're in nature, there's no way, that that's not closer to God too. There
Yeah.
God's house and nature.
Yeah.
Um, do you think that her faith helped sustain her, like the
Oh,
praying
I
every
think
day?
I think God pulled her through all of it and even brought her to us. It was like a divine appointment, and when you read the story, this is a thing that it's almost like you're time warped because, Lee was born in 1922,
Wow.
died in 1994. So
Wow.
she had like these chunks of time, with this strict family, with what happened to her and all that healing was a huge part of her time. And then 30 years with our family, and then she died. So she had, but through it all, it was God ordained because she really, and even for our family, the way she came into the center of the pain and the crumbling of the family. And she was the uplifting spirit, the healer, the words of wisdom, the empowerment my mom needed to get through a narcissist marriage. She was so much to our family that we never realized it. Well, we always realized it, but we never gave it the depth of thought until the I wrote the book. Just seeing the whole thing for full circle gave, you know, us appreciation for how it was all divine appointment and it was all divinely meant to be. And this story now that is resonating with so many people in so many different ways with mental health, family life, just so many secrets, identity crises, people grasp onto the areas that they're struggling with because there's so many issues in the book and it's out there in the world and it's helping people like heal, or even identify or open up about their problems. I get texts and notes every day about a new reader, like a stranger that I've never heard of across the country that is so touched by the book.
And I don't know how that happens, but it's a beautiful experience because we connect with other human beings. And you obviously did that in this book. And you
Yeah.
were honest about what was happening in your family, which is very healing. When
Mm.
people hear that, they're like, oh, well, I'm not the only one. And they can see how it went with your family. It's just amazing to me that we don't remember all the time how connected we really are.
Oh, I know. That's where, it takes God in another level when you think we're all put here and surrounded by the kind of people that we're supposed to be with, our families and our friends. No, everybody's with around us for a reason. Even people I ran into during writing this story, discovering the story was like synchronicities happened every time I was ready to quit. I'm like, something
So
happened and then
amazing.
it was like a breadcrumb dropped from the sky. All of a sudden I got another, information that took me to the next level right when I was at the end of my rope.
I love that. And I think if we can be quiet and we can be observant, right? And not be all like obsessed with the next thing we have to do, we can see those synchronicities and we can receive those messages. I had that happen on a recent trip to Florida. Somebody just walked by. I was sitting in a park and she said hi and we said hi and she just had this beautiful smile and I just just really enjoyed. I told her she was so lucky to have such a nice park because I was from New Jersey and it was freezing. And she laughed and smiled and kept going. And I really still didn't feel well. I had taken the trip to try to get the sunshine and I was like really it was the day I was flying out and I was really looking forward to getting home.
Mhm.
And she went to her car and then a couple of minutes later she came back and she sat on the bench next to me and she said, "I hope you don't mind, but I was in my car and I was praying and God gave me a message for you."
Oh my
Because
God.
because I had seen her earlier. I had been sitting on the other side of the park and she had been at a picnic table with all these papers and she was writing and studying and she said, "Well, I was over there, writing my spiritual practice that I do." And she
Mhm.
said, "God gave me a message for you." And it was such a beautiful moment. And
Mm.
when I told this to a friend, I said, "I can imagine a time when I was younger that I'd be like, 'Excuse me?' I would be like
Yeah, I
weird
know.
about it, but I'm older now and I'm open. And I
Yes.
know intuitively that this is a beautiful soul and I'll take it. I'll take it, the message." And she said the message was, um, "It's a little bit of a rough time now, but you will have peace." And I just was like, how did she even
Oh,
know? I mean, I just smiled at her. I didn't seem like I was having a rough time. But she
yeah.
knew because she's connected, and she's a stranger.
Mhm.
And we started talking, and I started telling her about how I did go there alone because my
Mhm.
husband's really busy with work, and he's like, "No, you need the sunshine. Go take a couple days. I'll come get you when you come home." And I told her that, and she's like, "Wow." And then I just kept talking to her, and she said, "I thought I came here to give you a message, but I'm also getting that my husband and I can do more because her husband is, still rehabbing from a COVID coma. He was like really sick." And she said, "I'm so inspired with how you do things on your own." Because we had talked about some of the things that I had done in Florida previously. And she said, "I live here and I haven't done those things." And it was just this beautiful exchange that I don't think everyone has all the time if you're not open to it.
You have to be open. Yeah, totally. And and you can really take away a lot when you're open and
I
then you
told her it
also
was a
connect with the
gift.
right people.
I gave her a big hug. I was like, "This is such a gift." And I felt uplifted both by the beautiful park, which, by the way, my friend who I was texting with, I was like, "I got to get home and I'll talk to you soon." And she's like, "Why don't you try to find a park?" Because I had hours before my flight. And the
Mhm.
idea that there was a park in Orlando, because I went to Orlando because I feel safer there and there's, lots of people. And I
Mhm.
stayed at a place where there's a lot of people. And I was like, "There's no park in Orlando." It's like this crazy place with way too many buildings. But there was this beautiful park by a lake. So my friend got me to the park, and this beautiful stranger, Mala,
Hmm.
told me I'd be okay.
That's
And
awesome.
I just needed that little boost.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I totally trust and believe in what you're saying.
Mhm.
And I'm so struck with how she found your family.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And
And you prayed for her.
yeah, my mom was praying for her. We were praying for somebody like her, and then it turned out to be a perfect match. So it's really a lovely story. It makes people reflect on their it makes people think about a lot of different things, like all their different what they're
Yeah.
connecting with in the story, and also how to tell story. Like it's very much written like fiction. So it takes
Yeah.
the reader in an emotional roller coaster. It's an emotional
Yeah.
revelation. It's really grabs your heart. Stays with you for a while. I get that a lot. People say, I can't get the story out of my head. It's hard to believe this really happened. It's
So beautiful.
one of those things, the truth is stranger than fiction. Yeah.
Yeah. And there is such a power in story. Yeah. So people they
Right.
resonate with that form. So how has this left you? I mean, you're obviously a writer now. I noticed you even have a blog on your website, and that you actually help people write their stories.
Yeah, well, I offer people a direction when they want to write a story. So many people have come up to me like, I have a story. Where do I begin? And I struggled with that because I was like, my first thing I did when I figured out the story, I Googled how to write a book. It was the most fundamental thing. And I bought one book called The Plot Whisperer, and I thought that book was going to teach me how to write a book. And after I read that book, I'll write my book. So that's how naive I was. And literally, like, who do I think I am when there's people that have gone to school for, got an MFA, a master's, a PhD, whatever, in writing and creative writing, and they still haven't wrote a book, or they're teaching writing, or they're editing, whatever they're doing great things. What I'm saying is I don't have any skills, but I was thinking, how do I do this? So I ended up spending a lot of time learning how to write and writing books, taking classes at Rice University, and then um, reading memoir, lots of different memoir. So I can see how they laid out story. I can see the arc, the hero's journey kind of thing. You really
Yeah.
start understanding the concept of story and plotting when you work with some kind of like script, tools. When you have to
Right.
create tools for, I call it a toolkit, a writing toolkit. And every
Yeah.
time I read a book, I learned more tools to put in my toolkit for when I sat down to write this. I'd pull that tool out of how to do dialogue, or how to create scene with senses, and how to, bring in blah, blah, blah. I mean, it was very challenging because everything I did was, it almost like my husband would come back from work and it'd be 8 hour day, he'd go, "How'd you do on the writing?" I'd be like, "I got two sentences done."
Oh my gosh. But see, you
But
respected the process and understood how difficult it can be. I'm
yeah,
impressed by that. Did you have an editor? Like, did you go through a publishing company?
I went through a hybrid publishing. I had an agent at first that pitched it to the big five, and this is before it's in its final, what I have now. And they pitched it to the big five, and the big five rejected it. So I got rid of the agent and I got the hybrid publisher. It's okay because it wasn't where it needed to be at anyway. And through the hybrid publisher, I went back and found an editor that was kind of an outside editor, and I really liked her. I did like shopping for editors at a
Yeah.
conference. You do speed dating, and you go through tables. Every 20 minutes you interview editors for
Wow.
like, a couple hours, and you can kind of see if there's a connection. And I found one that really connected and understood what I wanted to get out of this story and how do I want to present it. And I was at the very last draft, and all she did was take it to the next level in the way that my concept, met my concept. Like we would just try a chapter and say, okay, let's just see what you can do, what your editing looks like. And she was pretty ruthless though. I mean, it was a gut punching experience because she took a lot of my, what they call your darlings in writing out. They're my creative,
Yeah.
really masterpiece sentences. And then I realized, but she said, this isn't about showing off and being a good writer. This is about telling a story. You just want it to be all story.
She had that other view. It's hard though when people cut your words. The first
Mhm.
time that happened to me, I was like, what?
Really hard. She took out 30,000 words, and then she had me replace 30,000 more, but she prompted me with questions on what to write. So that was really great. And I ended up writing deeper into those areas that expanded the thought and kept the theme, and the
Yeah,
thread throughout the story. And it just kind of filled the gap where the story was kind of losing the focus. It brought it back to those little parts that the transitions happen,
that's
it
so
just,
cool.
yeah,
So what would Lee think of this book? I would love to know your thoughts.
that's a great question. I would say she would say, thank you, thank you. I'm really
Oh,
happy what you did. This is exactly what I wanted. And of course I I didn't know how she felt when all these things were happening because I couldn't interview her. So it was a blessing. That's a blessing too, because you don't want to go there. I think what I did is exactly what she wanted, her story to be
yeah,
told, happened to her in a way that connects everything. It connected all of us, like our family
yeah.
to way more. Mhm.
Now you touched briefly that on your dad being a narcissist and the difficulty that presented. Did he pass away before your mom, or did you have to keep dealing with your dad? How did that,
Yeah, he passed away
where's
much
that
later,
timeline?
just in 2021, actually. So it's not, I was almost on my last, round of the book
Yeah,
before he passed away. He never read the book. He knew I was writing a book, but he didn't even care. He was very I mean,
yeah.
you're self-absorbed. Um, he um my yeah, my dad, it's just kind of sad because we never really made peace with that whole narcissist thing. I think it was just watching him. He ended up, you know, his second marriage was somewhat sad because he didn't have the same love my mom had. There was just, it was all about money, really.
Mm,
It, and he actually married, I don't want to like make cut, you probably could cut this part out, but it's
aw,
probably not even
but
worthy to talk
it was
about.
painful. No,
It
but
was
that there's
very
a
painful to
backdrop.
watch him be abused at the end. He was very abused,
Oh,
and it was elderly abuse, and it was
I'm
he
so
went through
sorry.
it. So that was very hard, but some people say, well, maybe maybe it's full circle, but you never want to wish anything bad about anybody, but it
No,
was but the part of him that was sad is kind of he died to the family before he died.
right.
Not because of, he did have dementia, but it's because his ideas were, his self was robbed. He lost his self,
Yeah,
through the abuse. Yeah. So
I'm
that was hard to
sorry.
watch.
No,
Well,
I'm
we
so
went
sorry.
through it with
Yeah,
him, right? So it was like, oh my God,
yeah,
this is full circle too. But it is what it is. Yeah.
yeah. You've been through a lot.
Yeah. It was a lot. And why?
Yeah,
Why I have no idea. But I think we live and learn. Yeah.
yeah, we do. I
We
lost
can
my
take
mom
love.
kind of early, like my kids were little, and it
Oh,
really did impact everything.
yeah.
And you learn. I just think if you let it, it teaches you to be more compassionate and
Yeah,
understand that.
yeah, exactly. You take the lessons and you leave the
Yeah,
pain and you let the pain go. You forgive and you remember the good things and you
yeah,
move on and you just make the best of every day. And keep loving our kids and keep loving our family and our husbands. And, it's all good. It really
that's a
is. I mean, I'm
wonderful sentiment.
grateful. I'm
That's a
grateful
great way to end. Is
my
there
life.
anything else that we didn't talk about that you would like to add?
I would like to add one thing. I think it's not what happens to you in life, it's what you do with what happens to you. I think that's really important to think about because everyone in the world has stuff and stuff happens to everyone. It could be little or big, but the impact is, huge on even little things. And I would say it's what you do with that. Lee really taught us that in a big way. And I think also I've learned that with the pains and sufferings that our family have gone through is we've taken the good and healed the pain and moved on and making the best of every day because you only get this one life and here you go.
Yeah, that's a
Hmm.
beautiful thing and so good to remember. And I
Yeah.
just feel like part of your strength, I mean, definitely comes from your mom, but part of it comes from Lee too, that you were blessed to
Absolutely.
be, raised by Lee.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's
Our
just a
strength for
beautiful
sure.
part of it.
There's a lot of
Thank you for
blessings.
sharing. I can't wait to read it now. I'm sure
Oh.
you've got us all like on, Tinderhooks, like, oh, we got to read it now because we got to know.
Yeah, yeah, you'll love it. I'm sure you're gonna love it. I'd love to
I
hear what you
know
have
I
to say.
will. I know I will. And I'm going to love whatever you write next because I think you're on this like writer's journey now.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming on, and I really love talking to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Lynn.